gentleman I've known for a few years, and I've got to hear bits and pieces of his story, but this will be the first time I get to hear all of it together. And I think it's going to be amazing. Mark.
All right. Not any pressure. No.
And you can't lie because I know that.
I know. Oh, hello. My name is Mark, and I am an alcoholic. And I cannot tell you how grateful I am to be a member of the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous in good standing. I hadn't had a drink today, and Sunday was one of my favorite drinking days, along with Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Hey, welcome to y'all online guys too. Glad you're here. And let's see what it was like, what qualified me to be here, and what happened. I hope to talk about more about what happened, so don't let me get lost. Do I have a clock? Yeah. As I said, my name is Mark Spring, and I say that because there is no anonymity inside the rooms of AA. That's for outside here. If you don't understand that, you might want to get with your sponsor. And if I go in the hospital, I want you to be able to find me. So that's my last name, okay? Because I've done that one. I don't know. His name is Joe. He's in the hospital. You know, it's like, known him for years. Anyway, let's see. I was born in 1958 into a preacher's home. I don't think that's a real common occurrence in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. My father actually lived what he preached, and I've been around enough churches to know that there's a whole lot of preachers that don't live what they preach. But I was lucky in that respect, so I had good examples, and it was a good home. You know, I got a brother that was a vice president in aerospace, one that's an attorney, a sister that's a psychologist, one of the families in the top 1%, another sister that's a professor. And then there's me, I'm a drunk. And I tell you what, I worked hard at it. I didn't like anything about what I was raised around. I didn't like it from the get-go. I was wild from the womb. Started smoking dope about 12 years old. That would have been 1970. That would have been when it was still illegal and hippies were an abstraction in the society. And I wanted to be one really bad. And I was a little late. I was born a little late, but I tried anyway. In 1973, I hitchhiked to San Francisco to go to Haight-Ashbury and be part of that crowd. And that crowd had changed a little bit and wasn't quite to my liking, but I found plenty of drugs. And drugs are a part of my story. By the way, if you've ever read Bill's story, you'll know that drugs are a part of his story too. Phenobarbital is mentioned pretty heavily in there. So let's not get purist on me. You know, I wouldn't take a drink. I ended up going back to Texas. I picked fruit and I did everything else, hitchhiking around this country. I tried the Navy at 17. I have the shortest naval career of anybody I know. They kept me 13 days and said, "Get the hell out of here. You're crazy." And I took the travel pay and the 2 weeks pay and partied for a while. Got back to Texas, and they had lowered the drinking age in Texas to 18. Now you got to remember, all I can remember from my childhood and liquor was that they said that my grandfather was a drunk, and there was a bottle of Old Crow on the top shelf that was only used if you got real congestion in your lungs, and then you got it with some lemon juice and hot water. Anyway, that was the only thing I knew about it, really and truly. So all I knew was that my generation had its own drugs, you know, LSD, marijuana, some other good stuff. And I didn't want anything to do with the older generation's drugs. And so I literally did not take a drink until I was given a beer on my 18th birthday. that started what what I considered I thought it was pretty weak substitute for some of the drugs I was getting. But then I found hard liquor, and I found, I was from Texas, but Southern Comfort got me comfortable, and and it took off. Um, and it ran my life into the shits within 3 years. At 21, I turned around to this preacher father and said I needed help. And of course, the only thing he had was an idea that the church would save me. So he sent me off into the East Coast to build churches. Bless her heart. There's a woman named Mary. I wish I could still find her, but I can't. She was part of that little church, and she came up to me one day and asked me out to lunch. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to get lucky. Um, lucky does not even describe what I got, because what she did was trick me into taking me to a neighboring town to an Episcopal church. And I thought, this is the weirdest thing I've ever been for lunch. And we walked in there, and it was an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. She spotted my ass, and she knew exactly what my problem was. And that was my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous at the age of 21. One thing happened in that meeting. Y'all were the first people to ever tell me what I felt, truly. And you weren't talking about me, you were talking about yourself. And I thought, I know I'm one of them, but I am not. I'm a lot smarter than this. I can figure this one out. Which actually became a big part of my problem in getting sober. But anyway, I was convinced that I was an alcoholic, but that I could live an alcoholic life. I hear a lot of people in AA talking about how they were always trying to quit drinking. Hell, I never tried to quit. I mean, it was like, this is great. I just need to find a way to do this 24/7, 365. And it was pretty obvious to me. All I had to do was go to the casinos in Nevada where they never shut down and get a job. That's what I did. Became a crafts dealer and a bartender and worked for Harrah's Casino for more than a decade. Um, and my alcoholism just took off. It got to the point in the last couple of years of that time in Nevada that my boss would come up to me and say, "It's time for a vacation, isn't it, Mark?" Meaning that it was time for me to go to treatment, which I love treatment. I'm sorry, I could write cliff notes on treatment. And here's the deal, guys. If you go in and you play it right, you'll come out with a girlfriend. Every time. Every time. It absolutely never failed. Never did I attempt to get sober. I had no desire to get sober. Um, this went on. This went on. Yeah, I ended up going back to Texas when it got so bad. It had gotten so bad, no casino in Reno, Nevada would hire me on a full-time basis. For the last couple of years that I was there, I was on what they call the B board. And that was the union board, to where when they had big conventions and they had to have somebody come in, either for the gaming pit or behind the bar. That's what they called from. And that was the only way I could stay employed at that time. I was unemployable and I wasn't worth shit for anything. Anyway, it took me back to Texas. And after I wore out all but the last friend, who said, Mark, I don't know what to do with you, but I know where there's a free detox, and I think you ought to at least try it. And that was the beginning, the very, very beginning, of a journey that I didn't want. I never wanted to get sober, guys. I hated sobriety. Sobriety absolutely sucked. Life sucked. There was nothing pretty out there. There was nothing that I wanted. The only thing I wanted to do was get drunk and get laid. How the hell was getting sober going to do that? It just didn't make any sense. And it never did. And I kept thinking that I had to go back to that old preacher style. And anyway, of course I was crazy as a loon. But I did. And I made several attempts, I would say short-term attempts, and I couldn't tell you the length of time. I know that the longest, because what I would do is keep going back to these detoxes. or treatments. I didn't get treatments until I got employable, and that was a ways down the road. So, the longest that I put together was 17 months. And that was really what I would call the start of the journey. And that was in 1990. And after that 17 months, of course, I didn't do anything except show up at meetings and thinking I was going to catch sobriety, I guess. I don't know what I thought. There was no attempt whatsoever to work the steps, get a sponsor, establish a sober life. All I knew is life was in the shitter and I needed to get out of it and at least be able to sit on the toilet, it just wasn't any good. So that 17 months, I had managed to get in a little better shape. And I came back in my first sobriety date. And guys, I'm going to apologize right now. My current sobriety date is 12/26/11. My previous sobriety date was 1/12/92. That ended sometime in 2004. And there was a 7.5 year period of absolute misery. I would call it, you've heard of brownouts, that was kind of the way I lived. I was just browned out. My inheritance had come in. I didn't have to worry about anything. So I could just kick back and drink and it wouldn't kill me. Anyway, that's beside. Anyway, so as I am speaking, there will be times the lessons that I learned about the steps may come from either period of that sobriety. Because I'm telling you, when I came back in 1/12/26, I was reinforced by a previous 12 years of sobriety that collectively started coming back to me. And so I don't want to confuse anything there with timelines, but it's all been part of Alcoholics Anonymous. Because when I came back in 1/12/92, there was a guy who chose me and he said, "You need a sponsor," and I'm it. And, and Wallace Johnson is now dead. And he got out of this thing with a clear record. And bless his heart, he was the meanest son of a bitch that I ever loved in my life. But I couldn't pull any punches, and he pulled plenty. He pulled plenty. I got very, very involved in those first 12 years. Very, very involved in service in the local group, in Houston, in Texas, especially taking meetings into the prisons and everything else. But I'd never worked on the inside guy. You see, there was, and really, and truly, I think I qualify. So I'm gonna go on into what's happened in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was the first job I was given, of course, back then was ashtrays. I'm sorry we don't have that for y'all newcomers, because it was great. We got to find some substitute for ashtrays. I guess washing coffee goes, but we had to do that too. The second job I was given was, I thought, one of the hardest things that Wallace could ever possibly ask me to do. And he said that I needed to be a greeter. Now, we're talking meetings in Houston. We're talking, the average was 150 people, 200, these. And I was to stand at the door and I was to tell everybody hello and I was to ask them how they were, but I couldn't tell them how I was. This was like torture. I'm a little talkative anyway. Thank you, Stanley, for asking me. Anyway, it was, but I learned more. I learned more about the people in Alcoholics Anonymous by being a greeter. That we come from all walks of life, from all strata economically of life, from all conditions. There for a while, I was real proud that I was a low bottom. Bullshit. I don't care what gets you in the door, man. If alcohol is kicking your butt and you can't drink it without not knowing when it's going to end, and you can't not help but think about it when you aren't drinking it, you belong in here. I'm sorry, I don't care what you call yourself, you belong in here, because that is classic alcoholism. And so I've seen it in all forms. Anyway, so then next thing you know is, I'm chairing meetings. We were not allowed, same as my home group here, we're not allowed to chair until 6 months sober. But anyway, I went from there to actually sitting on our group's committee. Went from there to working with the state and in the penal institution and taking meetings in, even though I'd never done any hard time. Um, and I'm telling you, there is a higher power. I never did any hard time. Because I was in 13 jails in 11 states and one foreign country, and how they didn't lose me in Mexico, I don't know. But but they didn't, and I got out of there and got back on this side of the river. Um, but anyway, but I did. For a number of years, I carried meetings in with a couple of other guys that had been long timers, and we went to what was then called the Wall, which is Huntsville, Texas. And it was about the scariest place that I've ever been in my life, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to leave anytime I wanted, because I couldn't imagine. Because what had happened, this is definitely Alcoholics Anonymous, huh? You might, okay. This guy walks in, and I don't know, I was, when I met Thomas, which isn't his real name, I was about 7 years sober, and he walked in, and there was a black SUV out in the parking lot, and I immediately in my head, I thought, this dude's in the federal protection program. Sure enough, what has happened? He makes a beeline for my ass directly after this meeting and says, will you sponsor me? And it's like, who are these guys out in the parking lot? Oh, that's the U.S. Marshals. I'm in the protection program. Anyway, he didn't stay. He was way too nutty for that. Anyway, I don't know where he is now. He blew his new identity and everything else. Anyway, I'm sure he's caught up in that whole thing. Where, but no. So there was, that was good for me. I brought up Thomas for one reason. I have never been able to see inside of another person who was totally in delusion about who they were. And I say that because it reflected upon me, and I knew that I was in total delusion about the man that I was. That really didn't come out until my second period of sobriety. But the lessons that I learned by being able to view that and being able to be honest enough to know that that's what I was doing. Life had gotten really good in that first 12 years of sobriety. Really good. I'd gone to work for Hilton. They had promoted me way beyond my ability. And life was really good. My second fourth step has two things under fears, because I do not operate in fear, never have. It's just not a part of who I am. One is failure, one is success. Those are my two fears. Success is much more dangerous to me than failure. Man, I know how to get out of the hole, but I don't know how to sit on top of the mountain. And it still scares me. And I was managing both an Embassy Suites and a Hampton Inn in Oklahoma City. I had more business than knew what to do with. My bonuses were just skyrocketing. Everything. The trouble is I found that I'm not a marryable man. It doesn't work with me. But I had in this period of sobriety married a woman who had 3 children. I got one of them in med school, one of them into law school, and one of them that I just fell in love with. But anyway, but I had to get out of that. I was going crazy. Somebody, probably me, was going to get hurt, and I knew it. And that marriage was coming to an end. We had tried counseling, we had tried other things, but I mean, there were the lies that I had embedded in me were so deep. And my love of women, I'm sorry, but if there's a prettier thing than the woman's form, I don't know what it is. At least for this man. Um, um, so it was coming to an end. Was throwing a party that I had thrown for 5 years for all of my Hilton employees. It was the holiday party. Rented the same place I'd rented 5 years before that. Everything was just fine. I had not a thought in the world about drinking or anything else. And my assistant manager, who had worked for me for a long time, looked at me and she said, "Mark, you know, I've heard all those stories about you and Southern Comfort. Why don't you let me buy you a shot?" Here was my word. Why not? Why not was worth 7.5 years of misery. Because, see, I am a true alcoholic. I took that drink, and I could, there's probably a couple of people in here that would know what the result was. I had to get out of that party so I could get to the liquor store so I could buy me a case and take it home and drink like I drank, which was to pass out and to wake up and repeat. Because that's the point to where my alcoholism had taken me. And that was the start of that 7.5 years of a brownout. When I came back into Alcoholics Anonymous, it was the result of a woman who I've been trying to get a hold of. She was my next door neighbor. And she could swear that I was going to be dead any day. She went down in Alpine, Texas. There were only 4 meetings a week. One of them was men's, one of them was women's. She went down to the men's meeting one week and said, "There's a guy back here who bought one of my houses, and he is in there drinking himself to death. And if y'all are any kind of alcoholics, you'll get down there and save his ass." And they told her, "You know, we don't save asses." But but there were actually, by that time, there were 2 people that I had known from the previous AA in Houston, Texas. One of them would come by in the morning, and one of them would come by in the evening and bang on my doors and say, "Mark, let us take you to detox." And I'd cuss them out and tell them to go away. Finally, there was one of them who ended up being my first sponsor on coming back in December of 26. I said, "Okay, Ben, if you'll quit coming by here, I'll go to detox." So, and it wasn't treatment; it was straight detox. I went to a place that was 8 blocks north of the Rio Grande River in El Paso, Texas, down in the Barrio. And I was the only drunk in there. Everybody else was a junkie, and they were jonesing, and I was sitting there. I think that DTs is worse than jonesing. I don't know, but it appeared to me that I was having a harder time than they were. I know that because I was crazy. Seeing the things, not being able to get jumping at my own breath, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was horrible. I detoxed and they let me out. They kept me an extra 5 days. They were a little worried about me. They had better sense than I did, but they let me out. And I drove home, and there was no way I was going to get myself home that day. No way. I was jumping at every car that passed me. And it was 220 miles across the West Texas desert. And so I stopped and I got a couple of steel reserves. God, that's some sorry shit. Anyway, just to calm me down. And I had drank one, and I got to a little place in the middle of nowhere, truly in the middle of nowhere, and pulled over. And I was about to open the second one, and I did open it, and I realized that I didn't want to feel like this ever again. And I poured that beer out and got to Alpine, got with Ben. And I walked up to Ben and I said, "Look, Ben, you knew me 20 years ago. I don't want anything that this AA little goody 2 shoes life has to offer. I don't I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that. But I will do everything that you tell me to do to work these steps. And when you're wrong, that I get just as miserable as I did in that first period of sobriety, I'm out of here because I know how to be miserable." Well, I did what he told me to do. And what he told me to do was truly, truly. And if I didn't think that I was powerless over alcohol, that I asked whatever higher power I thought there was to let me see my powerlessness. He had me write it down. He had me share it with him just in conversation. We just sat and talked about it. And I did. I realized that it wasn't about being an alcoholic or not being an alcoholic. It was about my powerlessness over the bottle. The way that it came about, really and truly, and I'll never forget Ben doing this. He said, Mark, your powerlessness is because you keep looking for a spirit inside you. He said, I want you to look at the back of this bottle. What does it say? It says distilled spirit, son. You've been seeking this all your life, but you've got to get over the fact that the spirits in this bottle are going to kill you and they're never going to give you what you want. And that was how I came about to my idea of powerlessness. I also came to realize that in that first 12 years, I had never fully accepted the second half of the first step. I'd hear these guys talking, and it sounded like they were managing pretty well to me. No. And I thought, well, I just need to be sober, and I can manage my own money. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't let me do that. So, and I realized, and that is what happened. That was the reason that I reached the pinnacles of success with Hilton and thought that things were based upon that something about this man was based upon that. So anyway, realizing, and this is the biggest benefit of my current sobriety. I haven't had a drink today, but we're not talking about tomorrow. My current sobriety. And because I do know the power of the first drink, and I do know the goodness of one day at a time. Trust me. Anyway, I am not capable, no matter how sober I am, no matter how well I'm working the program, no matter how well the steps are working me, I am not capable of managing my own life without help from a higher power. Plain and simple. I'm crazy. I'm delusional. I lie to myself so well I could make movies out of them. I'm telling you. And I believe it, and I believe it. And it's only through a higher power that I can come to the truth. Now, I don't know about any of y'all. I did need that spirit, but for some reason, this higher power I've got always comes to me with flesh on bones. Always. I have never heard from God directly, but I've heard from him from y'all a lot. And so all I need to say is, I think I ought to move out to LA and hold up in one of those bungalows and see if I can't write a screenplay. My sponsor will say, Mark, you're nuts. I'm saying, I'm sorry, I keep leaning. That's what I need, because I will. I can come up with good ones. I am retired. I've got a beautiful life, but you let me wake up and think about it for 5 minutes. I think I need to go get a job. Are you crazy? I don't need a job. Anyway, but that's just the way my whole thinking works. Y'all are the ones that straighten me out, because I came to believe. I love the fact that came is a transitive verb. It never stops. I'm still coming to believe, because if I have a higher power big enough for me to know all about, he ain't big enough for this boy. It's got to change every day, and it's got to be a challenge to find out. And there has been some semblance of sanity restored. That much I can tell you. No, being raised in a preacher's home, I thought there was only one God and only one way to him and all of that stuff. Y'all told me that I could pick out whatever higher power I needed, that I didn't need to call it God. I could if I wanted to, but it was completely free range territory. But that I had to have this power. Um, and although it had come to me in little bits and pieces in those first couple of steps, I really and truly, I was given, and I've heard it in Montana. I've heard this used as the set aside prayer. I wasn't told we weren't setting squat aside. I was told it was the know nothing prayer. God, I know nothing about you. I know nothing about me, and I don't know anything about AA. But if you'll make me willing, I'll do my best to learn what I can. And that was the way that I came to the third step. And I'm really glad that I was told, man, if you had given me the slightest bit, well, you know, a little bit, man, I'd have run off. No, I needed to start at ground zero and come up. And I'm really glad that I did. You know, I have I have a huge ego. I'm not scared very much because I'm too stupid to be scared. Fear is it's just never played in my it never has. Um, but I hate a lot of things. I'm scared of a few things. I got an ego at least as big as the God that I serve. Um, and I absolutely love women. So that was my fourth step. That was my fourth step. Okay, I'm serious. Um, you know that that first sponsor still gave me the formula for the four step that I still use when I redo them, and I do keep doing four steps. I'll be doing another one here real shortly with a new guy I'm working with. He told me, Mark, I want you to take 4 pieces of paper. I want you to write on the top of them. Top of one, I hate. I want you to write on the top of the other one, I'm scared of. I want you to write on top of the other one, I fucked, and I want you to write on the other one, I fucked over. That format works for me. I don't understand resentments and fears, and but I understand hate and scared of, and so I, because of that four step and getting honest to the best point that I could without delusional thinking, and I don't have delusional thinking for one reason, not because I wrote a four step, guys. It's because I did a fifth. And that sponsor said, "You are so full of shit. That's not the truth. Why don't you go back and I'm telling you, the fourth was wonderful and it was cleansing. But I could still lie to myself in the fourth. I don't know about any of y'all, but I needed that sponsor in the fifth. Because see, I love that. And if you ever hear me read the fifth step, you'll you'll always hear me say and emphasize and another human being. Because I can lie to God and I can lie to myself. But if I have a guy who knows me, I cannot get away with shit with him. And so that's why I needed it. Guys, I live in the sixth step, and I probably always will. Um, there I just have some character faults that I still like to massage until it gets painful, you know. And then it takes the pain, which, if you don't know, pain is the touchstone of all spiritual progress. That is in the 12 and 12 in the sixth step. So just in case you want to look that one up, but I can get enough pain to where I can humble myself, to where I can tone myself down to myself, to where I can get in front or actually get on my knees like y'all taught me, to say, we got to do something about this. And I think I've identified what the problem is, and I've got agreement from another man. And yes, I would like to have this. And that's the way that I live in the sixth step. And it is, and maybe I'm just a bad AAer, but it is cyclical to me because I keep coming back to it. You know, absolutely. I love the eight step. I thought I was going to be able to go out to all of my ex girlfriends and tell them how sorry I was. I love it, Alec. Um, um, and that's just not the case. We got down to it. The fourth step says, and the fourth step says that we need to get down to causes and conditions. And it was the causes and the conditions. that I needed to direct in my 8-step list. That's what I needed to address, and to the people that were affected by both the conditions and the causes. And so that to me is the heart of the 8-step. And the 9th step is wherever. There's still 4 people on my current 8-step list that the wherever has not occurred. I've heard this read whenever. I'm sorry, I disagree with you. I think that Bill was a word crafter. He used wherever for a purpose. I don't necessarily need to go hunt these people down. In fact, I'll probably do more harm if I do hunt them down. But if I ask my higher power to get me willing to make amends to them all, as the step says, if I need to make that amends, the wherever will show up. And I can give you examples out of my life where it's happened. And I mean, in the weirdest places. But I was ready and willing to make those. And so that's why I'm very aware for the 4 people that are left on that. You know, I absolutely love 10, 11, and 12, and there's no way. Oh, I'm going to finish on time. I absolutely love the way that 10, 11, and 12 has been grouped. You know, I have found something of the faith that I was raised with. It's my brand, and that's just fine because AA said I could do that. It's of my understanding. But I do find it in some of the traditional faith settings. And I get to do a daily inventory, sometime momentarily inventory, to keep me on track. Now, I don't know about y'all, but when I get a delusion, I don't find out about it in 2 days. It's immediate. You know, I get an idea and I start acting on it, even though I'm wrong. So I you know, there are sometimes that 10th step is being worked real hard in a day, and other times when I just need to be able to get a good night's sleep and I can retire at night and see how my affections, my actions have been either positive or negative in the people that I've run across. You know, I don't know anything to society. But I know one thing. I owe everything to the person standing in front of me. Everything that I can possibly give that might help them to have a better life, a better day, a better moment. It doesn't matter. That, to me, is a responsibility. And I believe that our declaration statement says exactly that. See, I don't have to tell people I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have to live being Alcoholics Anonymous, which says that my hand is out. And that takes many, many forms. It takes many, many forms. And so I love the freedom that gives me. And I love the freedom of the 11th step. My God, I'm crazy as a loon. But, you know, I don't find out about it until I take those periods of meditation and I talk to this power that's out there. Because then, you know, and sometimes it's like, man, I hope this doesn't get above the ceiling because I know I'm crazy, so they got to know I'm crazy. And then, you know, so I absolutely love it, spend a lot of time in it. In fact, my first hour and a half is the most selfish hour and a half of my life. It doesn't matter if I got to be somewhere at 6 o'clock. That means I'm getting up at 4:30. That's what y'all taught me. Actually, that's what that first sponsor taught me. I hate discipline. It's the worst 4-letter word I ever heard. Anyway, but I've got it. And I wouldn't trade that time. You know, I look at the day ahead. I use those principles that have been given to me to judge what I'm intending to do today, and to try to keep myself in line, and to try to learn a little bit more about what this power would like to instill upon me so that I could share it. It's not that I want power, it's that I want to be able to share and to help. You know, so when and that just leads exactly to what the 12 step says. Yeah. I'm to practice these principles in all my affairs. Yeah. What are my principles? God knows I arrived with none. Anything better than what I had. No, I do. In fact, it's amazing. Sometimes I chide myself. I'm being a little too hard on myself, because I think, well, that wasn't very nice. And they couldn't have cared less and probably didn't even notice, but I notice. And I like that I notice, because I know that it makes me the man that I never dreamed that I could be, because I didn't have the knowledge that a man could be the man that I am. A life that is storybook. I'm telling you that I didn't deserve. Thank God I didn't get justice. But that I am able to live because I live one day at a time, not taking a drink today, being a part of this fellowship and being able to talk to a power that I believe genuinely loves me more than I can even love myself. It took a group of drunks, thank God, because I wouldn't listen to anybody else. And thank y'all. Thank you very much and with all of my heart. Because I am way too stupid to figure out how to live this kind of life otherwise. And I am glad. And some of y'all have heard me say it, for every drop of whiskey that got me through this door, because I'm a hardhead. But thank you.